Good evening, everyone. Nice to be here and to present this tonight. Hopefully, you'll learn a little bit and hopefully enjoy my images. So let's get started. Just wanted to talk about some of the equipment that I particularly use. It's not the be-all and end-all, but it's what I particularly use myself. So I'm a Nikon shooter. I got a Nikon D850, great full-frame camera. Large image sensor, and one of the main things that I like about it for night photography is the high dynamic range. So the ability to take images with more details in the shadows without blowing out the highlights. Lens of choice, well, the lens of choice is I use a 16 to 35. It's an f4 lens, and it's what they call a super wide angle, especially for the landscape shots or cityscapes. The wide angle is preferable. It's got a good overall sharpness, minimal vignetting, and for night photography, the f number is not really important because we're going to be on a tripod and we want slightly longer exposures. I particularly like this super wide angle lens because it's not bulbous at the front and it does actually take filters. So if I'm doing shooting in the daytime, I can put filters on it as well, and it's a reasonable price. Sturdy tripod is essential with a good, I use a ball head, but a good head for adjustment. If you're looking into doing panoramas, then a rotary base with markings is preferable, and also a bubble level on the tripod itself is preferable for panoramas. So if you don't have a super wide angle, then you can still do panorama, still get cityscapes, but you may have to go vertical in your orientation and do a panorama shot and stitch the images. Next on the list is a good cable release, mainly because typically the cameras are limited on their internal timers to 30 seconds. If you want to go longer than that, then you'll need a cable release. If you're happy to stay below 30 seconds and move around your ISO, then you can use your internal timer on your camera. Another good item to take with you is a powerful torch. So one with a focusing beam is ideal because you can use it in a pinpoint mode to help with focusing by illuminating just one particular item, or it can open up wide for light painting of larger images without getting hotspots. Another important part is leveling. So leveling, especially at nighttime, it's difficult to see levels as easily in the daytime. So some form of leveling is preferred to try and get the image as level as we can. Because typically with landscape at nighttime for cityscapes, for example, you have to be extremely careful about when using a wide angle lens that you don't crop out anything once you apply lens corrections. So I always look at adding extra daylight around the image so that I won't have any problems when I add the lens corrections. So a little bit about safety and planning. Check out online guides for the city you're going to visit. They can be extremely useful at identifying areas that you want to visit and particular things you want to take photographs of. Always be aware of your surroundings, especially in cities, which can be, there's good and bad areas in all cities, and it's good to know where they are. I always ask at the hotel before I leave out for an evening shoot, where shouldn't I go? And they're usually pretty good at giving advice of where to go and where not to go. If you can, go out with someone else or as a group, just safety in numbers, and then try and blend in. So only take what you need. Don't stand out as a tourist. So don't carry a paper map around with you. I always download the maps onto my phone or pre-enter addresses into my phone, so I can use the navigation feature in your phone to go from one point to the next point without having to rummage around or look like you're lost. Um, Always check the weather before you leave and take appropriate clothing and refreshments. So if you're going to be out for a night, typically the temperatures will drop, and so you want to stay warm and you want to have some nourishment with you so you can stay out longer. Nothing worse than being out in the cold and miserable and cutting your night short. You miss out on opportunities. And then the last thing I do is always set sunset and moon times and moon phases for the location you'll be in. I typically use photo pills, very, very helpful app. There's a lot of information out there, and it's very useful to try and plan ahead for your shoots. So typically, I do travel with work, and I do get opportunities in the evenings or early mornings to do photography. So you have to take the opportunity as and when it comes around. So to be prepared is ideal. And then the other one is my top tip is if you don't pack away your tripod. And you may say, well, why don't you want to pack away your tripod? Well, it can be very useful at deterring people that want to take your camera stuff away from you. Let's put it that way. Um, it can be used as a baseball bat. Let's put it that way. So always a good deterrent to have to hand, let's say. And yes, I have used it in that way before. So with night photography, you're always battling with very harsh, bright lights coming from street lights, for example. So how do we battle that? We don't want a big bright spot in going through the shot. So one way of doing that is turning them into starbursts. Um, so how do we do that? Well, it's basically based around your aperture. So if you're in the f11 to f16 range, you're going to basically not have a spot. You're going to have a starburst, and that's because you're closing up the iris blades. That is then creating those corners that then the light bounces around and causes this starburst effect. Now, interestingly enough, the number of blades makes a big difference on the look of the starburst. So if you take, for example, odd number of blades, it actually doubles the number of star points compared to an even number of blades where you only get the same number of points. So you can get a very different look based upon your lens that you're using. So how do we know what properties of the lens you have in your bag? So there is a very good website out there. DxO Mark has huge amounts of information on cameras and lenses. So I just pull a couple of images off their site and things to look at around the lenses that you have in your bag or one you're thinking about purchasing. They can give information around distortion maps, sharpness, and vignetting of the lens that you have, and at different f numbers. So you can experiment with this, and it's really it's getting too technical, but it gives you an indication of what to look out for in your images, what to plan for around distortion and the potential for vignetting in your shots. Yes, you can correct those in Lightroom, but it's always good to know ahead of time. So one of the main things with Cityscapes is having a good depth of field. So I tend to shoot at f11. It gives a very good depth of field. It gives some good starburst effects on street lights, and you don't have to worry too much about focus stacking your shots. So one of the main problems people find is focusing at nighttime, and this really depends on the camera you have and the system it uses for detecting and focusing. Most of them use like a phase detection, which looks for contrast between light and dark and then sharpens accordingly. Um, I find with my camera it's extremely good at nighttime, but I just outlined the method that I typically use. So I'll start with the camera on a tripod. I'll put it into live view mode, so therefore I'm using the back display screen. I'll start by focusing about a third of the way into the image, looking for something bright to focus on in the scene. If there isn't something, then I'll use a torch to illuminate that part of the scene, and it helps the camera do the autofocus. At that point, you can zoom into the image in live view, and you can check the sharpness of the shot. If you do struggle with your camera, another tip is you can actually increase your ISO while you're focusing, which can help you focus, but just remember to take that back down again afterwards. Once I've got it sharp, what I'll do is I'll turn off the autofocus feature because I'm set for my shot, and I'll do that on the body, not on the lens, because I don't want to touch the lens at that point. I'll take an image, I'll do any manual adjustments, and then I'm ready to go. And then what I'll do is I'll tend to take a bracketed shot of the scene, so to ensure that I have enough data across highlights and shadows. But don't forget, if you do move your camera, if you tilt down, if you zoom in and out, you'll have to go through that process again to refocus. So what settings? Well, first of all, shoot in RAW. Secondly, I tend to shoot in around about ISO 200, not the lowest setting in the camera, but it's a balance between having no noise in the shot and having a reasonable exposure time. This camera can go down to ISO 64, but the duration of the shots tends to be a lot further out, past 30 seconds. I use aperture priority mode and tend to start at LF11. I tend to use the timer or the release in my camera, but if you're using the release in your camera, it's a good idea to set with a 5-second delay, so that when you press that shutter button, that vibration settles back down before the camera takes the shot. Also make sure any stability like VR is off as you're on the tripod. You don't want the camera fighting the stability in the shot, especially with the longer exposures. I talked about the focusing mode. I use auto and then disable. I'll typically bracket my shots. So I set that on the camera. I take 3 shots, 2 stop exposure intervals. So that's -2, 0, and +2. And then exposure mode is matrix metering over full area. Now, it also depends on your camera, but there are, I know on the Nikon cameras, there is the availability to save all these settings in a custom and user option. Some have it on the dial as U1 or U2, or sometimes it's in the menu under custom banks, where you can load all this information in, label them, and then you can go straight to it and you're ready to go. So looking at aperture priority, there's 2 shots here, same image. One's at f4, one's at f11. I just really want to talk about the differences in the 2 shots. This is in Cologne in Germany, looking over to the Dom Cathedral. So in the left picture, it's at f4. The front of the shot is nice and sharp. The cathedral in the background is a little bit soft. The water itself is, you can see some of the movement in the water. But the main thing is it's not sharp from front to back. If you look at the one on the right side, it's an f11 shot. It's sharp from back to front. You do get that smoothing effect in the water, so you're actually getting a little bit more reflection from the shoreline. But everything's sharp from front to back. And that's what we're really looking for. So it depends on the camera you're using and the dynamic range in the camera. So it's always good to take a bracketed shot. So we have the data available in the shot. So these are the two extremes. So you've got the +2 exposure. So it's bringing out all the details in the shadows, especially under the bridge. And then you've got your -2 exposure, which is focused on not blowing out the highlights or the light on the pier on the bridge itself. So what do we do with those two? Well, we can combine the two and blend them. Some people call it HDR, but I prefer to call it blending. So you're basically taking the best of the both and then combining them together to be able to bring details out the shadows, add some additional light to the shot, and detail in the shot. So interesting on this shot, if you this particular bridge in Germany has thousands upon thousands of padlocks attached to the bridge. It got to a stage where it was overstressing the bridge, and this is the main bridge into Cologne. They've actually started pulling up sections under the rails and putting composite mats down rather than having steel structure there, just to save weight. But you can see along the rail, all that shimmery is actually padlocks from one end to the other end. So what else can we do at night time? So what we're looking for something different. Well, road patterns and lights from traffic are a good way to draw lines through the shot, add color into the shot, add interest. Both these were taken in Dubai from the top of the Caliph Tower, which is the tallest building in the world. And this was on 148th floor looking down. So the left one is more of a wider view of the city, picking up on that intersection with lots of traffic moving through it, causing the buildup of the light and framing it with the buildings. And then the right side is looking more downwards, and the interesting patterns in the buildings and the lights from the shopping center below, giving interest and unusual patterns. These are a little bit tricky to take because we're shooting through a glass windows. So one tip is to always carry a small cloth with you, so you can wrap that around the top of the lens and cut out the reflections in the glass, so you can get a clear image through the glass. The other things I think about is not looking at a city from close up, but standing back and where can you overlook the city and get a different perspective on the city. This is actually on top of the Griffith Observatory, up on the hills, looking down into Los Angeles. So again, I picked out the sign on top of the observatory where there's a sign pointing you to the telescope where you can actually go and look at the stars. Given that as a point of foreground interest and hinting at where I was, but the main scene is overlooking the main part of downtown LA. Looking at car lights again, so you can use these in many different ways, whether it be leading you into the shot or through a bridge. And again, look at varying your exposure times. Look at the number of images. For example, on the New York Bridge, that was several images combined to get the streaking even through each of the lanes on the freeway there. The one on the right was in London. and looking at different vehicles. So the red lights on the left are the tail lights on a double-decker bus, so adding height to the lights as they came through, but also making sure that I had another image with the headlights coming through the shot, so you can see them in both directions. But if you're standing in the middle of the road, just be careful, okay? It's probably not the safest place to stand. Also think about how you're going to process them. Are you going to do color, black and white, or mono? This is the same image, slightly different aspects, but essentially the same location. So this is in New York, from the Brooklands Bridge side. I think it's called Brooklyn Bridge Gardens. And these are old wooden piers, but they give a fantastic leading line into Manhattan. Look at different aspects, the different ratios, but also look at whether you want to just do a mono where you're picking up on the yellow lights from the city buildings, or whether you want to do color or just black and white. All really work very well. I don't know what you guys think, but I'm not sure which one's your favorite. But they all work very well. Also look at not only just using a wide angle lens, you can use a telephoto zoom. So I was in Montreal. This is at the Royal Observatory Park. There's an outlook that looks over downtown Montreal. So it's a great scene to take a picture of, but also look at the city itself and what you can pick out, what stands out when you scan the horizon, scan the city and pick up on key elements. If you look on the right side, there's a big mural on the wall that was well lit. It stood out really well, but it was more in the brown tones. But turning it to black and white, it really pops out and really adds interest to that cityscape. And then the left is looking down a main street with car trails from a long exposure. Again, just a different aspect, and just try and think about what else I can do with that cityscape. Also lens, whether it's for portrait or landscape, it can make a big difference to the feel of the picture, the aspects of the picture. This is on top of Brooklyn Bridge. There's a walkway across the top. And you get a fantastic view of not only the bridge, but also the skyline. And changing your camera from a horizontal to a vertical can make a difference of how it feels. Also, by angling your lens down, especially wide angle, you can stretch items out. For example, the white line down the center, it looks a lot wider in the left shot than the right shot. And that's just by changing your orientation. So think about that as well. Some nice star on those lights from the bridge really illuminate the top part of the image and lead you through. Color. So this is in Singapore. It's called Gardened by the Bay, and they do a light show every evening. I think it's twice an evening, to music. And these are huge metal structure trees that are in the botanical gardens. They're lit with lights, but they're also very environmental. They're actually capturing water. They're a structure that's meant for growing plants up, but it's a great feature. But taking multiple images throughout the show, you get a whole variety of different colors, combinations, and it's a good idea to play around with those to see which one you like the best. I personally like the green and purple one better than the red, but that's just my choice.
Hey, Jonathan.
Yeah.
If you don't mind, as you go through these, point out where and when you needed to use a flashlight to fill in.
Okay. Yeah, I'll take that in mind. I can't think of any that I did any light painting. But yeah, I'll bear that in mind. Thanks. So buildings are always good in cities. A lot of different structures. These are two very modern ones. Great reflections in the water. This is in Copenhagen. So the left one was a shopping centre with the restaurants, and the right one is the National Opera House. So the benefit is the one on the left is actually, I would call it more blue hour than nighttime. Just after sunset, you get this brilliant blue effect, well worth trying to capture. Sets the orange in the picture off very well. Long exposures smoothed out the water, and try and get low down as well. Alter your height because it can make a difference, especially when you're shooting, trying to get reflections in the water. So other things to look out for are monuments in major cities. That they are around there. The one on the right is in Trafalgar Square in London, and the one on the left is the Vietnam Memorial in Washington. Interesting story on the Washington one. I was probably sat on the ground taking that shot. I knew what I wanted. I got it framed up, and it was a case of waiting for the right moment. I tried multiple times. I was probably there for over an hour, sat on the floor, trying to get that shot, mainly because of the people walking through wasn't a problem. They would disappear. The problem was if someone's walking through with a cell phone, or if they're using their cell phone searching for names on the wall, then you can't get rid of those. You can't. They don't disappear with a long exposure. So it was timing it right, getting the right opportunity, just to get that one shot. And sometimes you just have to be patient. But it was just the reflection in the stone, the lights running through, and the illumination of the Washington Memorial was just a classic shot.
Jonathan, do you find yourself having to correct a lot for distortion with your wide angle lens?
So yeah, I typically use Lightroom's corrections, and also straightening is another one that will, especially with buildings. If you're close to the building and you're looking up, you can get a lot of distortion, angular distortion on buildings. So sometimes you have to go in there and straighten things up, and that's why if you're looking at the shot, I tend to zoom out as much as I can to make sure I've got free space around that, so that I don't end up cutting off part of the shot that I wanted. But yeah, that's a good point on correcting. So these two are more modern structures. One's in Chicago, the Cloud Gate. Try to take a different angle, having the city actually reflected in the Cloud Gate in the beam. Trying to get a little bit of orientation of the size of it from the people in the shot. So they are ghosted, but they're there. It gives you some movement in the shot. And I also like the movement in the clouds as well that are picked up in the top surface of the Cloud Gate, and also the blurriness of the clouds in the background. So again, that's all the features and you can plan to try and do. And then the other one is the Tri-Bowl, which is in Incheon in South Korea. Unfortunately, it's supposed to have water below it, but it had been drained ready for the winter. So I was hoping to get some nice reflections, but the scene worked okay. I picked out the modern buildings in the background, skyscrapers, as a point of interest and balance that against the structure itself. So it's always interesting trying to find and get a different perspective and something different. Again, lights. The cities tend to use a lot of lights in their structures. So look for different opportunities for light. In Guangzhou, China, the right building is actually their opera house. In the background, in the back of the shot, you can see their stadium, and then there's a reflection of the restaurant in the midground. So all reflected in the main building, in the opera house building. So you've got multiple reflections going on, which is quite interesting. And then on the right side, we've got Brussels. This is at the Art Institute, where they're basically using large floodlights down from the side buildings to illuminate the gardens, which again adds a lot of interest to the shot. Or the other thing to look for is art installations or observation wheels or fairgrounds that can pop up. Something different to look for, adding color, water, movement to the shots, doing multiple exposures so you can get movement in the wheel, for example, in the Millennium Wheel in London, but also a faster exposure to capture some of the people movement at the bottom as well, and combine those two together. So blending. So I just thought I'd show this image I took in London. So I wanted to capture in more detail the bus element, which is very distinctive for London, the red double-decker bus. But I also wanted to show it moving. So I took two images, one at f2.8 and one at f8 aperture. So basically the top one was be able to capture an image of the bus and the people, and then the lower one was to capture the light trails from a second bus that went through the shot. And basically you can blend those two together and bring in what elements you want, and you can create a different image with the elements that you need. This is San Antonio, Texas, and the Riverwalk, and there's the river cruises that go through, and on the boats there's small lights, navigation lights on the boats. So again, using the long exposures at nighttime, it gives you these really cool effects of the lights through the water and the trails through the river. Adds interest to the shot.
How long of exposure was that one with the boat trails?
Off the top of my head, they're probably in the region of about 20 to 25 seconds. I believe the one on the right side was two shots, and the one on the left side was a single shot. Hey, good old Dayton. So even in our city, there's an opportunity to take photographs. Excuse me. The interesting thing here is the movement of the water through the shot. Blurs the reflections, and you get this stretched effect of the lights. So again, get down low and long exposure. And then Copenhagen. This is the old, they call it New Harbour, but that's the old part of town. These were commercial buildings for trading, but they're now restaurants. So you get a lot of traffic through there at the night time, but there's also the colored lights and the colored buildings as well. They've kept the historical colored buildings. So that gives you really good color interest and reflection. Also look at different aspects of your shot, whether it be near or far. So this is Sydney, Australia. So the main image, I know it's not night officially, but it was close to the end of sunset across the bay in the park. Unfortunately, I got kicked out before I could take any night photographs. But it's a really interesting shot, getting the bridge in the background, the opera house at the front, and the fair on the other shore on the right side of the image. Not sure if you can pick it out, but if you look on the top arch of the bridge on the far left side, if you follow it up from the tree, you can see a whole bunch of people walking on top of the bridge. So that's if you're brave enough, you can go and do that. Unfortunately, you can't take a camera with you. So I was tempted, but I declined. But then, if you get close up, have a look at different aspects. It's a beautiful building, very unusual building. Pick out a single element. This part of the opera house is actually a restaurant. So picking out the restaurant, picking out the big light at the top of the peak, and the effects it gives you is quite unusual. And explore different perspectives. Look up, look down, look for something different. The Singapore Gardens again they had a walkway that was running through from one column to the next. And when it was at nighttime, it lit up. It gives you that great leading line through the shot. But I also like how the towers are angled inwards, and it draws you in up. And then the blueness of the sky in the background is quite unusual. And then the Dubai Tower again, looking down. This is down on top of a man-made lake that's around a shopping centre. Which is a huge shopping center. So the blue lights you can see in the water was actually, they have a fountain display at nighttime. And that was the fountain lights over time lighting up, and you can see where all the jets are throughout the lake. To give you an idea of the size of this mall, they have 4 Starbucks stores. It's that big. Yes, I did get lost, so it's huge. Another good thing to look out for is churches and cathedrals. There's different aspects, different modern or traditional, stone or concrete. The one on the left is in Brasilia, in Brazil. It's the cathedral. Very unique statues on the entranceways, very modern. And the one on the right is the Dom Cathedral in Germany. So very classical, 3 entranceways with ornate stone carvings. So play around with light, play around with black and white as well. Bridges. So typically your main cities will have bridges, but look at different aspects, how you can incorporate them into the shot, whether it's a foreground interest or a midground interest, whether you want to see a lot of it or a little. So think of that element, and think of how it's lit. So you can see on the Brooklyn Bridge, looking down, either side of the walkway is the traffic below you. So on one side, you've got the white lights from the headlights, and on the right side, you've actually got the tail lights. So again, it's adding interest and illumination in the shot. So I hope this presentation has inspired you to go out and explore and capture your own city shots. This is Cincinnati, down by the river. So go out, explore, and wish you the best of luck.
That's great, Jonathan. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Those are amazing shots. Does anyone have any questions for Jonathan?
was the picture in Copenhagen on the Nyhaven? I couldn't spell it right.
It's on the New Haven. Yeah, it's called New Haven, which is the old part of Copenhagen. So it's in the main part of the city.
One
It's
of my favorite places.
yeah, it's a beautiful city.
Jonathan, one thing I really admire about your pictures is the color. They just seem so rich without being oversaturated. What's your secret there?
Oh, I can't tell you that.
Okay.
No, I was going to put something about processing, but I didn't want to be here all night because there's lots of different ways you can do things. My way of doing it is I'll take the images into Lightroom. I put the lens correction on and the aberration setting. I'll make some minor adjustments in the main panel, and then I'll typically put those settings across my bracketed pictures so they're all the same. And then what I'll typically do is I'll take those and I used to have to take 3 shots, but now with the Nikon I'm using, I only use 2 shots typically, or even sometimes only 1 shot. But I'll basically, if I'm going to merge them, I won't do it in Lightroom. I don't particularly like the outcome in Lightroom. I use a software called Easy HDR, and I put them in there, merge them together. Their ghosting is very good, and their blending is very good. I like that how they come out, and I export that back out into Lightroom. Usually using their natural setting, so you're not overexposing things. I don't tend to do a lot of adjustments in Easy HDR. I'll bring the combined image back into Lightroom and I'll make my adjustments there. And I'm always mindful of when you're blending, you're putting together a lot more information, and you can oversaturate or overprocess it very, very easily. So it's a good idea to sometimes make some adjustments, go away, come back to it, and look at it again, and just to see that make sure it's how I remembered it, or it's how I want it to be presented, and not over exaggerate things.
You know if this Cincinnati one was more than 1 shot?
Yeah, that was a pano. It was a vertical pano. So I think that was 6 shots.
But only 1 of each position?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Only 1 of each.
That's great.
But that's what you get with a Nikon, you see.
Yeah. Oh, I know. Yeah. One thing you didn't talk about that I think it's not that you can, it's just comes naturally to you, I think, that makes your photograph so phenomenal is your eye for composition and framing. That's terrific.
Yeah, I'm an engineer by trade. I probably got a little bit of OCD, so I like everything balanced. So if I just go back, like New York, let's just take the classical New York shot. Making sure that it's balanced, making sure that you can't have it symmetrical, but it's balanced from left side to right side, top to bottom. Is probably just where I'm more attention to detail. So
I have shot there and I love that shot. I wish I could have achieved that when I was there. The one on the left is terrific. They're all terrific, but I really like the one on the left.
Yeah, the one on the left, did you have to individually burn out each window? Because it all looks black and white around the yellow.
Just in HSR, just took everything down except for the yellow.
Wow, cool.
So you're basically making it black and white by desaturating every other color.
Cool.
Another great use of the HSR panel.
Yep. Yeah, I use that a lot. So
Excellent.